I guess I better get on stage. Hi, and welcome everybody to the School of Atelier Arts. I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome, welcome. We have been working on this project of painting a sphere on grisaille, which means painting in black and white. And we've been working on this for 3 weeks now. This is our fourth week, almost a month. And a lot of people, when they're like, "Oh, I'm going to paint a sphere. Oh, I've done that before. No problem. I'll have it done in an hour." Right? And it's not that you can't paint well in small periods of time or long periods of time, but the point of this particular project is to make sure that we are exposing you to new ideas, new thought processes, new techniques. And in order to really learn them, it's about slowing way down. So please go ahead and say hello in the chat. I always love seeing where everybody's from. Welcome, McGree. Good to have you. Excuse me. I was like so determined to be over this cold by today, and the cold's like, nuh-uh. um, so we are going to work on a rendering pass. Now, this pass can be the trickiest pass because you can have something that you're really happy with right now. And then if you get off track even for a second in your rendering pass, you can go and make a big mess out of the painting, right? You're like, oh, I'm just going to smear this. Oh, I'm just this. And all of a sudden, this little area you started with, you've ended up, smearing over the whole painting. Now, we do have a slight advantage. Because we have not painted on this for a few days because of the weekend, and it's pretty dry, right? So in theory, if we really mess something up, we could pull back or wipe off any mistakes that we made and try again. That being said, it's not so very dry, especially with this titanium white on here, which tends to stay open for a long period of time. So it's best to not just mess everything up. So that's our goal today. Don't mess everything up. Um, it's going to, our process today is similar to what we've done. We are going to have our strings, which I already pre-mixed, our 9 values. If you're not sure how to mix your strings, please check out the entire video we did on mixing up the grisaille strings. I think it's episode 2. And so we have a brush, we have strings. I actually got a brand new brush today because when you're doing small things and doing a rendering pass, it's really not good to have splayed bristles, right? So I treat myself on a rendering pass to a new brush. Welcome, Lisa. Good to see you. And we're going to use this brush, and essentially what we're doing is really simple and really hard at the same time. We're looking at any area of our painting that looks out of order in some capacity and adjusting it. So for example, it's hard for me to see in reverse. I'm seeing that there's a little bit of a darkness here, whereas on both sides, it's a little bit lighter, right? Now, okay, I've identified a problem. It's kind of looking like a little bit of a divot right here. The question now is, does this need to be lighter, or do the left and right sides need to be darker? Remember that identifying a problem is only half of the work that you have to do. The other half is making sure that you are adjusting it in the correct way, either lighter or darker, depending on what what you need. So let's ask ourselves the question on this one little bit here. If I lighten this, it's going to connect with these two things, but it might also create a point-like feeling in my sphere. Whereas if I darken these two sides, it'll also kind of unify it, but it might darken my sphere too much. Remember that at the end of the day, I want the sphere to read light, right? And it should be reading like a white sphere. So it's probably a little bit of both. I probably need to lighten the dark spot just a tiny little bit and also darken both sides a tiny little bit. So we're going to be doing a lot of, I hate calling it tedious because to me it's fun, right? But there's going to be a lot of time spent on small areas, and I don't have a ton of new information for you. It's kind of like we're just finding little holes in our painting and adjusting them as we find them. Welcome, Leola. Good to have you back. Okay, so the hard part about this type of thing is that we are not getting to start from our shadow or our light like we have on our previous 2 passes. We're kind of jumping in. And so it's really common that when you just jump into a random part of your painting, that you choose the wrong color on your brush. Like, it's very unusual to just hop in with exactly the color that you need. So it means that we need to make an adjustment we need to decide what the adjustment is. So we need to decide whether it's lighter or darker. Like, are we going to darken what's around it or lighten the dark spot? And then when we put our first color down, it most likely is not going to be a perfect match. And so we need to not panic and be steady and deliberate to make sure that we continue working on that one little patch until it is the color that we need. So if you've made it to this point, you have a lot of discipline, right? We're 15 hours into this painting. So I trust at this point that you have the discipline to be really slow, but this is the most disciplined you have to be. This is where students take a really good painting and sometimes drive it into the ground. All right. Which is fine. If you do that, don't panic. Like, there's a reason why most atelier students spend, to do 2 or 3 spheres, right? It's really unusual to get it right the first time. So even if you do drive it into the ground, you're still learning a lot, and you still have these videos on the School of Atelier Arts, YouTube channel and website and whatnot to, start again and follow the process again. So you're not going to be perfect the first time. This is a learning project because hopefully we're all learning, and we'll just keep at it. Welcome, Ellen. Good to see you. All right. All right, so what I have here, again, the palette with my 9 steps on it. You can look up the video too on how to do that if you're not familiar with that. I'm going to start with this one area that we've already identified where it's just a little bit darker than what's around it. You're going to see me a lot step back today because we're dealing with really, really, really small increments of change in our value. And when your nose is up on them, it's almost like you can't see it at all. Like, I almost can't tell a difference at all in the area that we identified, right? When my nose is up in my painting. But when I'm far away, or, the camera does it too. When I look on the camera, it's very obviously a dark spot. So see, if you're painting along with me, stand back, identify a spot, and then get really, really close to it and see if you can still see it, because it's really hard to see small increments of change up close. Giving yourself distance is going to help you. All right, so you're going to see me standing back a lot today because I literally can't see this change that I want to make when I'm this close to it. Okay, so I have the dark spot, and I've decided that I'm going to lighten the dark spot a tiny bit and also darken a little bit of what's around it. So the scary part is that you have to make a blind guess, right? So I'm going to make a blind guess here. Wow, that was actually a really good guess. I was about to show you, oh, you can adjust it. All right, that was a pretty good guess. I can go a tiny bit lighter. Remember that in theory, I have a lot of atelier training and a lot of experience, and I might get a little luckier than some of you who are doing this for the first time. Okay, so I've lightened this, and I'm already starting to panic because now it looks like this part needs to be lighter over here. And it's really tempting to just take the same exact color and blah, 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 right? But we still need to be methodical and train ourselves methodically and think methodically. And if we're going to keep this value here, we know that this one has to be a little bit lighter. And you have to keep your visual memory of where you're working. Oh, and now that's too light. All right, so I need to darken that area. And you just have to keep working in an area. Oh, see, now this is too dark. We're basically back where we started. Well, not totally back where we started. It is a little bit lighter than where we started because now it's lighter than this one. So I'm going to go ahead and work on the one next to it now. And you need that visual memory to remember where you've been. All right, that's not quite light enough. And these are really small increments of change. And we're finally hopping around like we've wanted to do this entire time, But there's a lot of responsibility because the more you hop, the more visual memory you have to have. All right. So do you see how I've been working on just that one spot and trying to eliminate that one spot? We need to work on some of the transition here. So now we have a big jump here. All right. So really all I'm doing is trying to find in between colors. Anytime there's a big jump, I'm trying to find the value that's in between value 1 and 2. Okay, so we just spent a whole lot of time on one little area, and it's essentially what we're going to be doing today. And welcome, Shirley from Mississippi. Glad to have you here. I love Mississippi. I was in Jackson a few years ago, and I think it's one of the coolest little towns I've ever been in. I'm like such a fan. Um, okay, so we're just going to keep working. I'm seeing, a little spot right here. So I'm going to work on this little spot and this little spot. Maybe I'll do this one first because it's closest to where we're working now. So I really don't have a lot of new information for you. If I had to like sum it up, it's look at any little place on your sphere that is too dark or too light and fix it, right? That's not a very I don't know. It seems like that's not enough information, but that's all we're doing. So, I fixed this spot that was a little too dark compared to what's around it, but now it seems too light between what's here and here. So I need a in between value there. And you have to remember where you are. I'm actually really struggling remembering where I am and talking to all of you. Oh, that's too dark at the same time. Like this is actually way harder than I thought it was going to be. I might need to shut up for a little bit so I can just think. Okay, so we're slowly working. It's feeling a little light right there. Let's find a value in between. Right, so we're just making small, small changes, just to smooth over the surface of our sphere. Um, I do have an announcement, not this week, but next week. I'm going to be hosting Art School Live for Eric Rhodes again. So, for those of you who may have first met me over there, I will be back. And for those of you who follow this channel, I hope you'll join us on Art School Live next week. I'm going to be guest hosting 5 different artists that I'll be interviewing, and each one will be showing us a different painting technique or drawing technique. Um, okay. That looks a little dark. Yeah, this is an art of subtlety. You really got to stand back to see what you're doing. Sometimes instead of thinking about blending, if you're tempted to blend, just think about how do I find a value that's halfway between one tile and another tile. We're just working on small, small increments of change now. Oh, that's way too dark. Okay, and now we have some big jumps over here that we're going to work on. But definitely stand back as much as you can as you work. It will really help. Oh, that's way too light. Uh, um, sorry, I got distracted by the comment section. I was like zoning out for a minute. But yeah, it's super fun. I love guest hosting over on Art School Live. I love, meeting artists, some of whom that, I had never met before. And actually, I have a couple really good painting friends that are joining us next week. So I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Ricky Mojica, but he's a dear friend of mine, and I'm really looking forward to hosting him on Art School Live next week. Might have been a little too late. These are really like a third of a step value changes. These are really not big changes at all, right? And softening some of this is actually softening our edge, right? By creating a more subtle transition. So we also want to be mindful that our edge isn't getting too hard or too soft. When you do a finishing pass, it's really common for things to start migrating around. So you want to make sure that your core shadow isn't going too far away or moving too much. Um, but you can see that we've been working on this area. Do you see how much even more beautiful this transition has become compared to where we started, just by getting smaller increments of change? And there's still a fairly big jump right there that I'm going to address. Oh, that's too dark. All right, so I misplaced my value here, and it's tempting to start panicking, but all I need to do is be methodical and it'll be okay. Just find the value that's halfway between what you had and where you're going, and you'll be fine. Look how much prettier that little passage is, right? Now, because we have more subtlety here than we do around it, do you see how it's starting to make like a little bump? It's looking like a little bump right here, right? These are really subtle things, but as we continue our transition and just cleaning up around here, then everything will kind of fall into place. So I'm gonna work, just next door to it a little bit, just clean up where I can. Um, it's hard because this part isn't so methodical. It's like find things that look bad and fix them. That's what we're doing. Um, okay. There is still a little bit of a jump here that I'm not quite happy with. I don't want to lose the nuance of my shadow, but I don't want to keep darkening it too much either. It's a game of subtlety. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna keep working around. Now, it's really tempted, especially anytime you approach the core shadow, to do this wipey thing that we keep talking about, and that nobody in here would ever give up all their beautiful tile work at the very last minute after 15 hours of work. I'm sure nobody here would ever do that. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, please refer to the previous 5 episodes where I say, "Don't do this." And thank you, Leola. Leola is saying it's amazing to see the transformation as you work on each section. Yeah, sometimes we just have to see what's possible before we can do it. That's a big part of atelier training. That's why it's strongly recommended to like pick one instructor and really learn with them for a long period of time. You may eventually learn from multiple instructors, but you need one consistent method to learn and practice, and then you can add into it. But if you jump around this instructor, that instructor, this instructor, that instructor, you get like part way a bunch of times, but you miss the big idea, the big picture, right? And so when you're working with somebody and you actually see what's possible, right, then you know where you're going and what you're striving for, right? So pick an instructor that's doing something that you don't know how to do yet and stick with them until you know how to do the thing that you started studying with them to do. That's my recommendation for all students. Um, okay. This is just a tiny bit light or dark, I mean, right there. And these are very small. There's a little bit of a dark spot right there. I want to adjust. And you can take this to a crazy level. Like you could spend another 40 hours doing this. Um, my goal is to wrap this project up this week. So I'm going to refine it until Friday and whatever is done on Friday. So today's Monday for those of you watching on a delayed schedule. So I'm going to give this 5 more hours of attention. So Friday is going to be our last day, and wherever it is on Friday is where we're going. But I'll try to push it as far as I can so that you guys see what's possible. Because seeing it's like the fairy values we were talking about. Sometimes you just have to believe in them first or see them, and then you feel like it's possible. Um, okay, I'm going to work down first, and then I'm going to work up. All right. I'm seeing there's like a dark bit right here that's really messing kind of with the vibe. So I'm going to work on that. It's a little too light. And again, your visual memory is so important on a finishing pass. It's so common that you go to mix something on your palette and then you come back and you have no idea where you just were, right? So be mindful. Oh, that's way too dark. I don't know what I was thinking just now. Do you see how this is starting to spread? It's getting a little bigger because I'm like, oh, just up here, but that's the path to the wrong way. Don't get tempted into. There's so many times that you're going to be tempted to just smear it, and don't let that bad voice in your head get to you. Okay, we talked about this before, but we have the core shadow here, but it really starts dissolving as it gets low in the sphere. And the reason it starts dissolving is because all this light is bouncing off of our tabletop here. So while I'm making these value adjustments, I'm also allowing myself to soften and dissolve the core shadow over here a little bit more. Remember, especially when working in the core shadow, we're still working across the form, right? It's so tempting to do the thing that we now all know we're not supposed to do. The light. So again, not a ton of new information, but a lot of obsessive small adjustments to really get a finishing pass on this. I'm finding the halfway of the halfway of the halfway between my values. And even while I'm working on a tiny area, I still have to be mindful about how it's affecting the whole in here. So as I've really got a beautiful passage finally going, in this area, it's starting to make this little bump here, right? So I need to be mindful that I'm not changing the feel, but it still needs to feel smooth. Coming through here. Right. It feels like there's a big transition happening suddenly from dark to light right here, as we've adjusted some of this, right? And I also want to be careful. Do you see how my core shadow is starting to look like it's dragging down here? So I still need to have the hint of the core shadow, even if I want it to read more softly. So I want this really beautiful transition, but I can't move the feeling of where it's actually drawn, right? Like it still has to be in this space, even if I soften it. So it's not so different. Like a finishing pass isn't so different from working on an edge. There's a little bit of push pull. You'll, make an adjustment one way. You may find you have to push it back the other way. And eventually you'll find the happy medium of where everything belongs. But again, just try to make sure that you're working across. Ooh, I think that was too dark. Got too aggressive there. Oh, that's still a little dark. Remember that if you do something too dark, you have to overshoot it to the light side slightly, and because it's going to pick up what's underneath it. Okay. I kind of have a little point. I feel like it's pointing right here. And so I just want to I did soften it, but I want it still needs to read as a curve. And right now, because I softened it, it's reading a tiny bit like a dent. So I just need to take the value down a tiny bit here to get rid of that dent. That was probably a little bit too much. And there's kind of a little bump over here too. So while I have this color, soften that bump a touch. Okay. Now what I don't want to do is keep hopping top, bottom, top, bottom. So even though there's some more adjustments to be made up here, I want to kind of maintain discipline in this little area down here until I get this shadow feeling exactly the way I want it to. Um, I need just a little bit more darkness in here. And then this is kind of a fast transition in here. So I want to find some in between values from here to here because it's just a big jump. But the question is, am I going to lay the values on the dark side or the light side? And it looks like I want to lighten this part just a little bit because it'll help accentuate the curvy feel. So you have to decide not only what the problem is, but in which direction it needs to be corrected, right? Um, Oh, that was way too dark. Just try to stay methodical. That's the hardest thing is that we panic, we put down a note we didn't mean to, and then the next thing you know, we're smudging things around, right? So if you want to be a great painter, you have to stay calm under pressure. Um, okay. All right. And we have a few more big jumps here that we can address. So it's like we have to maintain the drawing of the core shadow at the same time. We adjust other aspects of the painting. Okay, so now it looks like I have a white divot coming in here, right? So I softened it and I got some transitions, but the transitions dipped a little bit too far into the dark side. So now I want to push out from the dark side, transition from the dark side a little bit longer. That's too dark. Okay, now we still kind of have a point here, so my dark needs to scoop a little bit higher. And now I need to rework the transition again because I refixed the drawing where this visually needs to scoop, but now I need to adjust how it's connecting to this part of our painting here. Right, these are really, really subtle things, right? It's an art of subtlety at this level, and it takes some practice, right? If this is your first time tiling, you'll do a sphere. Hopefully, it's the best thing you've ever painted. You're really happy and excited about it. Put it away, face it against a wall where you can't see it. Do a second sphere and then compare the two. It's amazing how, when you start down this process, how more refined your eye can get, even from the first attempt that you did a month earlier, right? It's one of these exercises that can be tedious, can be frustrating, but will teach you so much. Because in order for this to look round, you can't get away with things that you can get away with in other projects, right? If you're painting a cylinder or even a face, right, you can get away with some lumps. It just looks like the person has got punched in the face or something, right? Then a sphere, any imperfection is going to read as a dent or a anomaly, right? Because we know what a sphere is supposed to look like, and it's perfect in all directions and symmetrical. So any asymmetry that ends up reading at the end is going to show. So it really is an art that if you can paint a sphere, you can paint anything. That was a little too dark. Yeah, that's definitely too dark. Okay, so we're starting to get the shape of the core shadow back, but it still looks like it's falling off down here instead of curving around. So I need to make some adjustments there. All right, now I'm not sure about this note that I just put down, so I'm going to stand back. And actually, I think it's okay. It looks out of place because it gets light next to it, but the problem isn't that this note is too dark. It's probably that it just needs to be a little darker next to it. And of course, now that I've darkened it, I need to rework the transition into the rest of my light. Okay, so we're starting to wrangle it so that it's curving back around. Um, I still see a few issues, like here, I think we need just a little bit more darkness. When I started, I thought that it was too dark, and then maybe I over-exaggerated it a touch to the light side. We're starting to get the curve back. There's this part right here that needs just a little bit more darkness. All right, and definitely this curve needs some assistance here. So this feels really dark right here, but I need this to complete the curve. And so what's really happening is I just need better transitions to my light there. Oops, that's too dark. And stepping back is your best friend. When you're doing this level of increments of change, um, you actually can't even see them up close. You can only see them from a distance. Oops. I'm You can tell that I'm rushing and a little panicky because I just overshot a light right next to overshooting a dark. Sometimes you just have to know who you are as a painter, and, some of that comes through experience. Like, I find that I know myself well enough to know that if I overshoot a light next to a dark, that I'm starting to rush and that I need to calm down. Okay, now I need to step back because, okay, I have this curve that's starting to read really clean here, and then it's going blue, 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 blue over here. And again, I'm starting to work up along my edge, and we want to be really careful we don't lose our sphere after all this time. Eventually, we can stop obsessing over it, but on the edge where the light is hitting the dark background, it's especially important because it's one of our sharper edges. Occasionally, I put down a brush stroke that just gives me chills. That was one of those. I don't know why. It just was exactly what I wanted in exactly the right place. That's what makes painting all worth it to me, like those little moments of just joy when something goes just the way you want it to. Okay, so we're still getting a little, I call it interference, like a little bit of fuzzy something going on down here. So I just want to clean up. It's like this core shadow needs to read soft and clean at the same time. That might have been overkill. Okay, so not quite as much step by step today. This is more the intuitive part of painting, right? Where you're just asking yourself, what feels off? What's itching my eye? And how do I adjust it? Um, Now I'm seeing as I worked here that now I have this kind of weird wonky line uh, between this value and my lights that I'm going to need to work on. But I want to finish this core shadow situation. I feel like this dark needs to last just a little bit longer tucking under here. That's too dark. But be mindful, we still need this to read as a white sphere. And when we drag the midtones into the light, that's when we can start making the sphere look like it's a light gray sphere instead of a white sphere. So we have to find that balance between the two, between the form and it reading like a white sphere at the end. I'm still feeling like it's going to a point right there. But I think it's not actually as much because of what's going on in the shadow. I think it's because of this weird light transition here. So I'm going to just adjust that because that's the second time it's distracted me. And I want to see if I can address it. I see Ellen saying, I'm looking forward to that feeling on my spear when I get those like little goosebumps. Yes. Every now and then you'll put down a stroke that you're like, yes, like that's amazing. And then as you go through training, that happens more and more frequently, right? And eventually they call it being in the flow state or whatever, where it just feels like that to paint. But, people, they get frustrated when they do atelier training sometimes because they're like, "Oh, I just wanna paint," right? And when I'm learning atelier training, it feels so like start, stop, like, what am I doing?" Because of all that thinking. But eventually all that thinking becomes second nature to you, and then you can really just get into this magical flow state, where you're painting at a higher technical level than you were able to before, and it doesn't hurt anymore. But that's why atelier training is tough is 'cause um, you're going through that phase where you're learning things and trying to integrate new ideas into your work. And it's not second nature yet. It takes a lot of practice before they become, oops, before they become second nature. Like how many times that little dark bit, how many times would I have put it down and then gone back to fix it on my palette and then come back and had no idea where it was, never to be found again. Ellen's that's a good point. It's like riding a bike or driving, only more fun, I'm guessing, and more heartbreaking, depending. Like, I don't know many people who are like, learning to drive a car is my life's dream, and it's what I was born on this earth to do. But I know many people who feel that way about painting. Yes, Leo is atelier training with sound effects, always with the sound effects. It's funny because even when I paint, and when it's just me, even if I'm not saying them out loud, like in my brain, like that's what's going on. Like you guys are just getting my brain uncensored, like All right. I see this like little kind of indent, like right. I'm trying to show you on the screen right here. Um, what am I going to do about it? So on the screen, it's like right here. It's funny because it's a little hidden from me because there's a play where there's just a little bit of light capturing, like a little bit of a ridge capturing light there. So I was blinded to it. And it wasn't until I saw it from your point of view that I could really see it. So, standing back, turning your project upside down on occasion, there's like there, and it's so subtle. Okay. Now, we are almost out of time today. So essentially today we focused on reestablishing our core shadow, lightening it a little bit. We still have some work to do on this edge. Actually, I'm like, oh, we have a few more minutes. I can do it. Watch me do something silly. Okay, we're definitely going to need to do some more work over here. Do you see how this is like dragging down into a corner? It's because the midtones aren't spreading for as long as they need to. But I don't want to do the thing where I'm like, no, I could get this done in the last few minutes of class today. No, I'm going to be patient. We'll work on it tomorrow. So we'll start kind of in this area tomorrow. We'll work on fixing this point that's starting to appear here. And then we'll work on how this white has a, like, do you see the sudden break right here? That's happening. So we need some values in between the lighter bit and this. So I'm going to pull the light downwards here tomorrow. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining me. Again, this is going to be a very mellow, slow process this week. And we're just going to keep picking away at it. And wherever we land on Friday is going to be the end of our project. But I just wanted to show you how we can take this up one more level of believability. So thank you everybody for being here. Please make sure to like and ring the little bell and all the things. Make sure you don't miss our next class. And then once this class is finished, I'm going to continue just on Mondays, presenting different little demonstrations and whatnot. So I hope you'll join us for Mondays with Mandy. And then again, not this week, but next week I'll be on Art School Live. I do have a little free gift if you haven't got it yet. So this is a little lesson plan that shows you how to key your values in a drawing. It also works for painting in Grisaille. So you can use your cell phone to scan it, or you can type in the URL there. And yes, what else? All the things, right? Okay, if you've been enjoying this class and you've been following along, or if you feel really excited about what you're learning, I hope that you will consider joining our Atelier Painting Bootcamp. There's a link in the description of this class for the bootcamp. We meet twice a week online where I critique your work. You also get free classes. So after I finish this sphere in here on the free YouTube class, I'm going to be starting a drapery painting that's like the sphere. So it's kind of the next step, taking what we learned on the sphere and we're going to be doing drapery, and it's going to be exclusively for boot camp people. So you won't want to miss it. We're starting that on the 18th. So if you're interested in joining, it's a great time to join us. You're going to get an extra bonus class given live, just like this class, but only for boot camp students. So I hope you consider joining us there. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. It was lovely spending the morning with you. Happy painting, and I hope to see you tomorrow.